Hey, everybody, welcome to the Green Cover Podcast, where we have really interesting conversations with some of the top experts and farmers in the regenerative ag movement. Join us as we learn together how we can regenerate, steward, and share God's creation for future generations. Very excited about today's guest. It's our friend Dr. Jill Clapperton, and we have known Jill way longer than we've had green cover. As we started our journey, as Brian and I started our journey from no-till to soil health, eventually to cover crops, and wherever we ended up here, Jill, we knew you way before green cover through no-till on the plains and all of the great no-till work that you were doing and that we were working in. So we've considered you a friend for a very, very long time. And in fact, I remember way back in the very early days of green cover, you not only helped us with some of the kind of soil health and scientific things, you really helped us in the business development as well. You invited us to Washington, and we met with you and Fred, and just that was really important for us as we were starting a new company to have people that we could reach out to and lean on. So thank you for all that you've done for us, for all that you've done for the regenerative ag movement, and welcome to the Green Cover Podcast.
Thanks. Hey, Keith. It was fun, but it was, encouraging people to do good things. There's nothing ever wrong with that.
Mm.
It's all and when they succeed wildly, like you and Brian have in your families, it's yeah, it just makes my heart sing.
Yeah, it's fun to be part of something that's just way bigger than yourself, and to know that yeah, I had maybe a little piece. When customers send us pictures of, hey, look how this cover crop grew, or look how well my cattle are doing on this.
You're
It's
like,
like, yeah, we had a little part in that, but good for you. You're really making it work. So, yeah,
yeah,
that is
yeah, that's how I
exciting.
feel. It's just like, sitting around the table, that time at the table with everybody, all your kids and all Brian's kids and everybody having a big conversation. And do we go and do we make a cover crop seed company? It's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
And and here you are,
here
all
we
those years
are,
later.
like 16
Like,
years later, and it's working.
yeah, so exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to be here, Keith.
Well,
Just very
great.
excited.
So for those who are listening, Jill, or watching, and don't really know maybe who you are or your background, share just a little bit of. I mean, your background would fill volumes of information, but just give people kind of the condensed version of kind of where you have come from, your journey to get to where you are now.
Oh boy. Okay. I started with well, obviously I went to University of Calgary. I have a degree in plant ecophysiology, so not the typical ag background, obviously. Just excuse me. um, we still have allergies out here in the.
Yes.
We had enough rain that it's actually still there's pollen in the air. Um, Anyways, I started at the University of Calgary. I have a PhD in plant ecophysiology and a master's degree in fungal ecology. I then went immediately to work for Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in Lethbridge as the rhizosphere ecologist, which at the time was a term that was absolutely coveted by a number of my colleagues, and which I also just really revere. And I saying revere, um, Albert Rivera was my inspiration for all of this from Australia. He really did a lot of the early work in the 50s on the rhizosphere, and I wrote this paper in my mycology class about the rhizosphere, and I just became obsessed with it, to be honest. And then in Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, I set up the first organic field trials in Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. I really believe in field work. I think it's really important. I think that it's important to do field work at field scale because I mean, although as researchers, we can learn a lot from plot studies, I still think we learn a lot from larger scale studies. Uh, I scared all my colleagues when I had integrated livestock grazing in my research plots because because all their plots were, of course, around us. So they made me put up this big fence to make sure the cattle didn't get out into their plots, which, they'd been working on for, a really long time. So I got it. Um, but we learned a lot from that, and I learned a lot from that. Then I went and started my own consulting company. Had a brief stint in Montana, and then moved to Washington State. And my head office is still in Spokane, Washington, for the company for Rhizoterra. Um, Loved working in the Palouse. Had some other opportunities to do some other things, which did a lot of really great field work there. It was wonderful. And then I left and I did a stint in Provo, Utah, um, with New Skin International, where I was working on supplements and growing plants for supplements. And I really at that and built a lab, an analytical lab, and I learned a lot about plant secondary metabolites, which has always been something I've loved. I've loved understanding and learning more about plant secondary metabolites and how they affect our health, but also how, the plants manufacture them and what they do for the plants themselves. And from there, I went to the West Coast to work for another company and also on supplements. And and then I I'm a co-founder of Audacious in the Boston area, and that company, that was I enjoyed that. I built the lab. I started right from scratch. The building, the lab, all of it. I got to work with Dr. Ian Hunter from MIT, which he's just amazing, on the development of technology and just to be in that environment with people that are that smart.
How I feel when I'm with you, Jill. But for those who don't know, Audacious is a nutrient density
Company.
testing company, right?
Yeah, we test for nutrient density. Um, Thank you for clarifying that, Keith. Yeah, we test for nutrient density. I was working with Eric Smith, who's the CEO, had a great lab team, super lab team. I just really miss that connection because my whole goal in the company is not so much about nutrition, like human nutrition or anything. It's more for me, it's more about if I grow things this way, are they more nutrient dense? Does that make my food better for you? Does this give me a lift in the market? I don't think we're there where we're going to get a lift in the market yet, but is my food better for you? Is this a reason for you to buy from me? And I think the answer is yes. I certainly think so. Uh, I certainly see, the difference, and you taste the difference. And I think that's the thing that I'm coming across more and more. I've been working with Chef Dan Barber at Blue Hill Restaurants and Stone Barns and in New York. And, Dan has always encouraged me about flavor and taste and saying, I think you can taste the quality, Jill. I think you can taste nutrient density. And I said, well, I don't actually, I've never doubted that. But more and more as I do more tasting and I'm, with more farmers that are doing these really incredible practices, you can taste the difference. I believe you can taste the difference. And I think that quality, the nutrient density, the quality of the food is we are tasting it.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt for a minute that our bodies are benefiting from it.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about Dan Barber and what he's doing, they order some cover crop seed for us. They plant it in some of their production fields, but then they will send their chefs out and they will pick different things off the cover crops to infuse into their meals, whether it's pea leaves or pea pods or, collard greens, different things like that. And so I just love how they're utilizing all the diversity around them and then incorporating it into their meals. So it's on going to his location, having a meal there at Stone Barns is on my bucket list.
Oh, it should be. Trust me. I mean, the other thing is they do make a cover crop salad
Yeah.
and serve in the restaurant and with these beautiful hand illustrated placemats. that actually have illustrations of every one of the plants that are in that cover crop salad. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool. So yeah, I've that my bucket list keeps growing. Isn't it supposed to get less as you get older, Jill? I think
No, it doesn't,
mine gets
because
bigger.
you're like me, you're a lifelong learner. So you're just gonna, you know, "Oh, there, that would be really interesting, add that on."
Yeah,
"Oh, that's
yeah,
really cool, add that on." And, I think it should just be that your bucket list should be just really long.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think it should be because I think we
I'm
all.
gonna need a bigger bucket, I think. But
Yeah, definitely.
so from audacious and all the nutrient density things to where you're in addition to all the other world traveling and consulting you're doing, you actually are living and working on a working operation now too in Kansas.
I am in South Central Kansas out of Etna, Kansas. All 5 of us are Etna.
So it makes Bladen look big. Yeah. Well, I think that's really cool because, that way you can put into practice the things that, you're teaching people. And I suspect, and again, we can get into this later. I suspect that you're finding many of the same challenges that all of the producers that you work with are finding as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, um, I've had some successes. Right now we don't have any equipment, so that creates some issues, for us, with the custom seating and things like that. So I'm working on getting equipment and getting to the point where we can do some of our own seating, so I'm not relying on others. And and then playing with the mixes, the forages, on the cattle. So I a small herd where I'm actually fence them off and then make and then eat and weigh and eat and weigh.
Yeah.
Poor little my poor girls, they get, it's like, "Hey, try this." And they're looking at it like, "Yeah, no." And, I taste this stuff so that I know it's like, oh, this actually one thing I learned a long time ago is that sometimes you need to taste the same forage that they're eating just to understand if it's any good. Because sometimes it's really not. Like, sometimes the way you've grown it or whatever, it's terrible, it's bitter, it's awful,
Super
and you're like,
bitter. Yeah.
"No wonder you don't wanna eat that. I don't wanna
Yeah.
eat that." Um, and and the mixes. So, it's about, well, how do they do in this one? How do they do in this one? So I do some experimenting that way for, weight gain and things like that. It's good.
Well,
And just
yeah.
how the plants actually grow. And the other thing is that I also consider myself a wildlife manager. So we have a real strong um we have a real strong program for quail and lesser prairie chickens. Lesser prairie chickens are endangered here. And, so I've been also doing a lot of, habitat, seeding habitat around the edges of the fields for the fields that we actually seed. And then and then the grazing is primarily on tall grass prairie. So we bring the cattle out, in the spring and the fall when the tall grass prairie isn't nearly as nutritious as the cover crops are. And the deer are benefiting from it as well, and the turkeys and all the other things that live here, and that's good. I mean, that's always fun.
Yeah, it's all part of the ecosystem.
It is, yeah. And I like seeing that we're building an ecosystem and that the ecosystem is really thriving. We're seeing actually this year we've actually got pheasants, a lot of pheasants hanging around, which with all our coyotes, I'm surprised, but yeah, we must be doing something right.
Well, that's great. It's great to build something, it's very rewarding for me anyway to be able to see that, I did this and this and here's the results that I'm getting. And I know that you've seen that for years with the people that you've taught and consulted with, but now you're getting the opportunity to see that on your own operation as well, which I think is really cool.
It's cool. I'm enjoying it, Keith. But I also, I mean, not that I because I've always done, real field level trials. I think I've always understood and ridden with farmers and worked with them in the fields. I think I understand some of the challenges, but when it gets to your own fields and, you know, the weather starts more rain than you had, you can't get in the field and you can't do things. It's just like you're sitting there just ah, watching everything do things that you didn't really want it to do.
Yes. Yes.
And then on the other hand, it's about learning. So, okay, what does my ground really grow well? So, I've been really watching the weeds and I've been doing a lot of plant diversity studies and like, what do I grow well? What is this soil really like to grow?
Yeah,
And
that
what is
you can learn a
doing?
lot. What is your soil telling you for sure? So, Jill, one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on the podcast, in addition to just catching up and learning what you've been up to, is we're very excited to be able to tell all of our people that you are going to be the featured speaker at our Southeast Kansas Soil Health Conference, which we'll be doing at our green cover location in Iola, Kansas, December 10th and 11th. And we're super excited that it worked out into your schedule to be able to come and to take a little deeper dive into some of the things that we're just going to touch on here today, but you'll be able to go into depth on them a lot more at that Southeast Kansas Soil Health Conference. So, give us just a little bit of a sneak preview of kind of what you're thinking about talking about. So we can kind of get people encouraged to come meet you in person, be able to ask questions, converse with you one on one. Because again, that's how we met you. At all these no-till events way back. Before we even thought about soil health, and we've really appreciated that relationship. And that's you just can't duplicate meeting people face to face and having those personal conversations. That webinars are great, but you gotta be in person some of the time. So give us a little sneak preview of what we can expect.
Well, we're definitely going to talk about soil health because everything that I do, the underlying premise of everything I do is about building, rebuilding, enhancing soil health. And I think that's the case. Like, I really want to enforce that for everybody is that no matter what you do, your overarching goal needs to be soil health. I'm improving soil health, especially with the talk about regen ag. Regen ag is about soil health. If you don't have soil health, you can't have regen ag. So let's talk about soil health and your soil, just getting your soil a whole lot better, and maintaining that soil health, sustaining long-term soil health. I'm also going to spend a lot of time talking about plants because plants are part of this. I mean, the most important thing about soil health is structure, and we can't have structure without good roots and lots of roots. And so we're going to talk a lot more about roots and different lengths of roots and creating root canopies. But we're also going to talk about seed. And I mean, you're a seed company, but how important is good seed? And what should good seed look like? What should good seed do? And why is that important? And how do seeds germinate? No, we're going to actually do a little bit of a dive into how seeds germinate, talk about the spermosphere. What's in the spermosphere? How important is that for disease suppression and things like that? And then we're gonna talk about the rhizosphere, which is that root zone. So the root, the soil attached to the root, the soil influenced by the root, because the influence of the root can be monstrous. Um, and every different seed you put in the ground has a different rhizosphere and has different rhizosphere exudates and all those good things. So, we're creating plant communities when we create cover crops. So it's about talking about how do these plant communities work a little bit from a rhizosphere perspective. And then we're going to go above ground and we're going to talk about how, now that we've sucked everything up, how do we get nutrient density in our plants? How do we actually build secondary plant metabolites, the ones we want? What happens to them? How do they build secondary metabolites? And then how do the plant regenerate, like actually absorb them and then recreate them when they need them? So we're going to talk a little bit about plants talking to each other and how they talk to each other, and why that's also important from our health perspective, because a lot of those secondary metabolites that they use to protect and defend themselves are things that we really need to eat and absorb in our bodies. And the cattle and the sheep and everything else that grazes on these cover crops, they need it too.
Yeah, no, that's great, and it sounds like it's something that people really need to get there so we can take this deep dive. It's interesting, one of the things that you said there, about how these plants are pulling all this out of the soil and packing it in, and these are things that we really need. I recently just I expanded. I've always had a talk on cover crop species, but I've really expanded that, and we actually turned it into a course. So we've got an online course now. I think it's a 5-part course just on cover crop species, a pretty deep dive. But one of the things that I kept saying over and over in that, because I realized that many of the cover crops that we're using, they're the things that you buy at the health food store. They're the things that are called superfoods, flax and chia and faba beans and chickpeas and all these things. It's like, hey, we're using those as cover crops. And I sometimes am not real quick, but it finally dawned on me that the reason that they're superfoods is because they are super at pulling the nutrients out of the soil. And the reason they can do that is because they're really, really good at recruiting the right biology to make that all possible. So it kind of sounds like you're going to help tie all that together and help us make sense of that.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. So, superfoods and sometimes that makes some of these cover crop seeds a little more expensive because we're competing against the human food market, which is okay because it's a very valuable product for both human consumption, livestock consumption, but also the reason that they're nutrient dense is because of how they're doing things in the soil.
Yeah. And and if you're going to spend that money on good seed, then make sure you have good soil health to support that good seed, because that's where you're going to see the most benefit from it,
Yeah.
for sure. That doesn't mean that good seed can help you get there, but it certainly is going to shine in healthy soil.
Yeah, we always tell people that we think our seed is different because of how it's grown, how it's raised. Probably somewhere between 60 and 70% of the seed that we sell is grown within our network. Yeah, some of it's grown right here on our own farm, but then we've got a huge network of producers, who started out as our customers. And, we've identified them as really good seed growers. And so we're contracting with them to grow a lot of this seed for us. And because they're doing it with regenerative practices, we just think that makes better seed. And I think that's really starting to show up because I've had just within the last couple months, I know I've had 5 or 6 people say, "Yeah, I got your seed. I ran a little bit short, so I ran down to the co-op and just got a bag of whatever they had." And huge difference, on how fast it came up and how vigorous it was, and just so it's encouraging to start hearing this and getting feedback from customers that are validating what we believe and what we've said, that regeneratively grown seed is better seed.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a difference in seed. I mean, when you're growing seed for, um, you know, indoors too, like I've been recently working with a company in Calgary, New Leaf Farms. We're growing everything indoors. And seed quality is so important. Um, it just means we don't get the same level of disease. That means that the plants just come out of the ground. I mean, we're getting things germinating in 3, 4 days. This is important. Faster they get out of the ground, the more they get roots, the better off it is. So
Yeah.
I've always seen that with seed. And then when we were doing green drinks at New Skin, same thing. If I got bad seed, I was spending so much time trying to get rid of things on it, and just, okay, this is fodder now. It's not. We can't do this for human consumption. And I'm not sure the cow should eat it either.
Just needs to be composted, huh?
Yeah, I think it's like this is no good.
Yeah.
But I think, I really see the difference in seeing, and I will talk to people about how they can just evaluate some of that themselves.
Yeah. Well, that'll be really interesting. I personally look forward to learning more about that. And we're going to have other really good speakers too. We'll have 3 different farmer panels. One will be talking about how to integrate all these principles in crop production. One panel will talk about how they're integrating these principles within livestock production. And then we'll have one panel talking about how they're utilizing biological products and biological concepts to greatly reduce their inputs in their farming system. So that'll probably kind of span both crops and livestock because a lot of these guys are doing both. And so we'll have a lot of local regional farmer involvement as well as Jill, you as our keynote. So really hope a lot of people can come December 10th and 11th in Iola, Kansas. You can just go to our website, greencover.com, and find the information about how to get signed up. So I want to move into a little bit different topic. Jill, I know that we've been trying to get scheduled. Uh, I think I'm busy. Your schedule is even crazier, and I know that you recently just spent time overseas. In fact, you were in Australia. Tom and Cassie Robinson, friends of ours. They've been here to the farm, been to some of our events. I think they're coming back for No Till on the Plains even as well.
Right. That's
So that'll
right.
be really exciting. So give us just a little bit of a update or report on what you're seeing globally, what you're seeing around the world as far as challenges people are facing and solutions that they're coming up with to make their operations more resilient.
Oh boy. Um, yeah, I was in Australia for a little over a month recently. I'm just back a week actually. Um, and it's been fascinating. I spent a week with Diane Ian Haggerty on the West Coast at Mullerin and with natural intelligence farming and learning more about that and the integration of the sheep and also how they're marketing their grain to
And the
bakeries.
scale they're doing it that at is incredible.
Yes, it is. And using like, you know, worm casting juice and Johnson Sue and also just really use integrating the sheep really well into their operation, and the sheep become really really important. And then to see the change in the sheep, I mean, you know, I see it in the cows too. Like some of them, when I get the mixes right, the cattle are just really content. Like like right now I've got weaners on one field and they're all just like laying around, like eat and then lay around. And you're like, well, that's the way they should look. Quiet and contented, like, not bawling all the time. Yeah, it's great. Um, and and I think the same thing. And then I was just there after shearing, and the fleeces were amazing, and the quality of the fleeces off those sheep was really quite spectacular. And they're seeing the benefit of them grazing in that way. But the other thing that I'm hearing more, and hear it from Grant Sims, I hear it from yeah, actually a lot of people I talk to, is having that bit of wild, like native bush or native ground in between like their fields or around their fields, and the advantage that they get from that almost as an inoculant, but some of the wild species that are in there as well. And just the benefit it gets to the health of their animals too, from being able to move into wild lands. And I think that was really interesting for me, to hear, how important that a number of people I was talking to felt about getting into, just seeing the benefit of keeping that bit of native bush around their place, just to really sort of help even the ground. And then, we talked about refugia too, like people, because in Australia they have to keep the trees in the field, and how that can be more of a refuge for birds and things like that, and how we can make that a little better, and how we can farm around this. Like we're used to these big long fields with nothing in them, and in Australia they have trees and whatnot, and it's like this is not a bad thing. This is a refuge, and think about it as a refuge, yeah, and think about yourself as a wildlife manager as well, and think about how important it is for movement of animals. And it's not necessarily that they're eating all the crops, it's more about the fact that this is a refuge for them, and they do eat more wild things, and yeah, sometimes they but sometimes we have to share. And maybe that sounds a bit altruistic, but I don't think I have any choice but to share, um, because there's nothing I can do and nothing I would do about all the wild animals that are around me and using the same land that I am. Um, and I think the other thing was just the diversity. Like it was freezing cold in southern Western Australia. It's freezing cold, but it was winter, coming out of winter, so it was really cold. Um, but just to see what people were doing, like orchards and vineyards and the cover crops and how they're talking about mixes and like what they can do in integrating livestock into their vineyards and into their um, different orchards. And there were a lot of different style of orchards, which was also really interesting, including things for eucalyptus oil, and how that was changing the quality of their eucalyptus oil, which was fascinating as well. Um, some interesting discussion with Indigenous people of the First Nations, and how important that bush is to them from a foraging perspective and a medicinal perspective, and how farmers keeping that and allowing them to forage on some of that land is so important for them. So it became like another enterprise and another level of the good things that we're doing in regenerative agriculture. And then just people talking about flavor and quality of their food, talking about the quality of the meat, quality of the cheese and the milk and the fleeces and yeah, just and the grains and the fruit. Well, a lot of I was up in Queensland and then we were talking about fruits and pineapples and things like that. And the thing about it is like, okay, I don't grow pineapples, obviously. That would be a real feat if I could do one.
Yeah, yeah, that would be.
Um, but it was so fun to understand more about how they do that. And then also see that, their drought's the same as ours. I mean, they're dealing with, but they deal, you know, with water issues in a slightly different way than we do. And I thought, wow, some of this, these are things that I could really learn. And there were a lot of things I learned that I can bring back. And that's the other thing. I learned, they learn, you always learn like new little things. And they're not big things, but they're just little things. And, and I like that. I like to just, and some of it's really practical for me, like, Tom telling me I need these slippers on my fork so that I can extend my fork so that it's easier to lift up pallets and stuff like just stuff like that.
Mhm.
Not really, a lot of people wouldn't think that was really great learning, but for me that was. It was like, yeah, that's a really good thing. You should have these. Um, and just meeting people that are, really doing a lot of great things and people who are really trying hard to get there. And how putting, this um I'm a Montessori educator and proponent, and this is really about bringing people of all levels together in one place and everybody learning from each other. And I think that is really important. I think we all learn better when we all learn from each other. And so if we can put people like all these farmers in the same room like you're doing with your conference, and we can all start learning from each other, we learn so much better. I learn better. I learned all the tricks and then you get to know somebody and go, "Well, I'm struggling with this. What do you think? Like, what would you do?"
Yeah,
And 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 I think, and that sounds maybe a bit silly, but it really helps both of us learning. Because then I learn the perspective that that person's coming from, and they learn where I'm coming from. And then in the end, we're weaving our information together and our experience together to make it all better, to make it actually to take it to another level. And I think always pulling the level up is what's really important. Elevating our understanding, elevating our knowledge, always a good thing.
yeah. Back in February of this year, 25, we helped Joel Williams put on an event in Omaha where he was talking, but he had Grant Sims and Tom Robinson there as well. What a great conference that was, because Grant would kind of, or Joel would kind of talk about the more scientific approach, and then those guys would jump in and show how practically they were using it on their farm. So, in visiting with either one of those guys, a lot of what they talked about was, they're really dialing in their trace minerals, and they're kind of customizing, the trace mineral
Mhm.
packages using sap testing, and, dissolving a lot of those minerals in, fulvic acids, and basically just kind of making their own amendments that they're doing, as foliar applications. Did they talk much about that?
Yeah, we did. I didn't see Grant this time, but yeah, Tom did. And really, I had a really nice in-depth discussion with him about, and his dad, Ashley, about how they're making these foliars and why they're making the foliars, and also I spent a lot of time learning more about foliars, like from the people that are also spraying like worm juice and more of the organic compounds as well, and how can we make them better? So the question was as well, I'd like to get some fermented things in there. How do I do that? Can I amend? And the answer is that you can amend you can amend your any of your ferments with trace minerals to get it to where you want it to be. I mean, and you just send a sample to the lab and find out where your levels are. They'll do an ICP analysis and give you your levels of minerals, and then you can amend it with others and then go ahead and ferment it even more. And then again, combining all those inorganic minerals into an organic form and then spray that on, and to give you even more benefit. And I think I've seen that in the Netherlands. Jeroen Klampe has been doing some of that work, and with Soil Heroes Foundation, they've been doing some of that. It works really well, and I think, and Tom's going to do some of that. I know that Shorty Fensky has been doing some of that in Canada, and some of the folks in Canada have been doing some of that. So, and actually some people, some of the organic farmers in the Palouse area, on the Columbia Basin, that are growing vegetables and whatnot, they've been doing some of that work. Where they're adding what they can, organic amendments in, and then fermenting the whole thing together, and then taking the extract. I mean, it adds a whole other level of complexity to your operation, and I don't want people to think this is simple, because it is not. But there's lots of companies that actually sell some of these products. You just have to make sure you get the analysis and that they're registered, and then, you can use some of them. But if you don't feel that you're up to the task of making these things yourself, then you can buy from a reputable person that has registered their product, and you can have a, and not just pictures, but you actually have real analysis on there that says this is what this is, and it's a guaranteed analysis that when you buy this, this is what you get. And I think, so there's lots of options for that. And fulvic acid, I'll talk a little bit about humic acid and fulvic acid and the differences and how you can measure that, and redox.
Yeah,
Because a lot of people are talking about redox, Olivia Housson's work, and what that means, and and yeah, there's some misconceptions out there, but we'll clear that up.
it's really encouraging though, especially in this day and age of, yeah. I just saw a graphic of, all of these agricultural commodities that people are producing, with the exception of cattle, are down sharply in price, but many of the inputs are up. And
Yeah.
so it's no wonder that farmers are feeling the financial squeeze when you're getting hit on both ends like that. But by the way, cover crop prices are down. Uh, One of the few inputs that are not than they were last year, just saying. But it's encouraging to know that, for the farmer, for the producer who really wants to dive into it, there are alternatives, and you can make a lot of these products yourself, or like you said, you can start with a really reputable company, and then move into your own production, or kind of mix and match and do some here and buy some there. But yeah, it takes work. You can't do it, on 10,000 acres by yourself, until you've started with it on a small scale. Now, Haggerty's, they're doing it across, tens of thousands of acres, but they didn't start that way. They started and they figured it out, and then they've really scaled it up.
Yeah, they figured out a recipe that worked over and over again and then said, "Okay, now let's ramp this up because now this is something that we can do." And as they take over more farms and they change them and turn them around and the land becomes better, and I mean that was interesting too because watching their farming, like, so for a lot of us that are used to conventional agriculture, it was very uneven. So there's some, that's really, growing well, and then some that's not growing as well. And then what's really cool is at the end, it all evens out. And the little tillers have grown strong and the big ones have finished, and they all finish together because of the biology and the talk between everything. It's, some plants are in a better resource patch than others, but the other ones catch up because they're feeding those, and it just, in the end, it all looks very even, just as it would in a conventional field. And that's the thing that that's another lesson from the what I would say from all the travels I do is that you have to watch the whole movie. You can't just get halfway through and go, "That's bad, I'm done." You because you don't know until you actually see the end. You don't know what the result's going to be. I mean, I'll give you an example off my own. I seeded the cover crop last year, and conditions were brilliant. It's like, oh yeah, finally, here we go. And germinated, and then 2 weeks of hot 100-degree wind, dead, dry, dry, dry. Thinking, okay, well, that was awesomeness. I guess I'm going to reseed. Reseeded and some other things because now I'm later in the year, and go out this spring, and there's all this sandfoin. And the lentils had all grown, and it's like that was seed from that I thought was gone. Those are plants I didn't think had done anything. And then there they were just flourishing. I mean, I had all these sampling flowers all over the field, and I was like, wow, look at that. And I really needed to watch the whole movie before I got, and if I'd sprayed all that, I would have missed out, and it would have lost all the benefit of having a bloat-free legume forage in my fields, and a perennial at that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that analogy. You got to watch the end of the movie, but I also think you have to be careful that you don't jump in and start watching in the middle of the movie, because that's where a lot of people want to do it. They don't want to start from the beginning and have to
Right.
learn, and because it is kind of a step by step approach, and you can't just jump into the middle and expect to have a good ending. You have to start at the beginning, and because the middle of the movie sometimes is the struggle. But
Yeah, and sometimes the middle of the movie is like, "Oh, this is bad. How am I gonna salvage this? How am I gonna save this?" And that's the thing is sometimes the save comes. You you just have to watch, and I mean, I admit that having animals, like grazing animals, has been a saving grace in some of this because we had a failed wheat crop this year, winter wheat crop, and we got hailed, and now I have all this volunteer winter wheat, which is going to get fed, and I just interseeded a bunch of broadleaves into it, and you know, I mean, it's going to be those are the things you can take advantage of.
yeah.
I could, and because I have animals, I can take advantage of that.
People with livestock rarely have a crop failure. They may have to move on to plan B, C, D, and E, but you can always salvage something with livestock. But the people without livestock, there's still opportunities. You probably have neighbors that have livestock. But it takes more effort. It takes more work. And even if you're not making a ton of money by letting other people graze that land, they're bringing in biology, they're bringing in diversity into your system that probably has a lot more value than most people think.
Then you get the organic matter and you get the weed control too. So let's think about that from a cropping perspective of the people that don't have livestock. And I'm not, saying, oh, the only way to do this is with livestock. Um, I am going to talk about companion planting because I think that for a lot of people, companions and intercropping are a really good solution to some of the diversity issues and to getting rid of some of the disease and then building up some of the, insects that we need in order to, stop some of the other insect damage to actually build things. So there are many ways to do that. Like, I mean, I was just with a seed grower in Queensland and he'd never grown anything between the rows ever. And I encouraged him to grow fenugreek and Phacelia and there's one other in there too. I think chickpeas might have even been in there. And with his wheat, and this is seed wheat. And it was amazing, the rooting, the change. And you could see we had chickpeas in one of them, and we had flax in one of them, and we had flax in this and the other, sort of progression up. And when we dug the soil pits behind each of the treatments, it was really interesting to see the change in the rooting and how the roots changed, but all the nodules were really active. The chickpeas weren't doing much in the wheat, but the wheat was really benefiting from it. But the other thing that was really cool was to look down the rows, and we're starting to get some stripe rust in the wheat, and to look down the rows and see that where we had certain plants, especially the Phacelia, we didn't have any stripe rust. Like there was no, yeah, there was yellowing here, yellowing there, yellowing here, and then no yellowing. Huh. And these are things didn't have to measure. You could just look.
You can see it.
You could see it, and you could see that the neighbors were right, like immediately next door to where we were doing the field day, and you could see in the neighbors that they were really struggling with stripe rust, like they were gonna start spraying. And over here, we had no reason to spray. Wasn't getting anywhere close to being sprayed. We just started having some, even though the neighbors were well and truly entrenched with it. And I think that's because of the other plants that were in there. It's the only reason we could explain it because we were getting more stripe rust in the control. And that's the other thing we talk about is like, okay, you want to do these experiments? You want to understand how to do this? You need to have a control, or a reference, which is how you do everything you normally do. So you just do what you normally do, and then you're comparing it against all the other things that you're
Yeah.
doing new. It's the only way that you can really understand what you're doing. I mean, so many people
Yeah.
forget that, like, well, you really need a control, and you need it next to it. I don't want your control being like 5 miles away. No, that's not good enough. It needs to be right next to it. And you just need to do one strip of each of the others, and that's all he did. He just went down and back, and and then asked at the end to say, okay, Russell, would you consider? He said, oh, I'm going to do this from now on. I just have to figure out how I collect the Phacelia seed because he said, I want that stuff.
Yeah, it's valuable seed for sure.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
he figured that one out too. And he was like, okay, I'm going to figure out how I get that and
yeah,
clean that. He had all the seed cleaning there. And it's like, I'm going to figure out how I get this out of there because it was flowering and it was above the wheat. I mean, because so there was no way that we weren't going to be harvesting the wheat without the Phacelia. It's just the way it is. So we're just waiting. He's going to be combining here next week, I think, and we'll see if he gets any greening and how that works.
yeah. One of the things we did this spring, as a little bit of an experiment in our, we've been doing interseeding into corn experiments, for quite a while, but we decided to do some in soybeans. So we planted the soybeans in 30-inch rows, and then same day planted a cover crop mix of oats, rye, flax, and mustard and buckwheat. So we had a five-way mix out there, and the mustard just, as you can imagine, is one of the fastest growing plants, and it was blooming yellow, and it was above the plants, and it just really looked nice out there. And we felt like we had fewer weeds and probably more beneficial insects, in that strip. And again, it was one strip out of a field; it wasn't the whole field, but we saw enough that encouraged us that we're going to try more of that next year to see what that looks like and to see, what can we get away with soybeans. You got to be a little careful because whatever you grow is going to have to go through the combine. And so, unlike corn where you can keep all that companion underneath and it doesn't become a harvest issue. But there's so much cool work going on with companion crops, and we're learning so much about how plants, when you give the right plants together and give them a chance, they're so much more cooperative and not competitive. And that's
They're
just such a cool
synergistic,
thing to
totally.
see.
I mean, this is where I say 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2 anymore. It can equal 4, 6, 8. I mean, because these plants really like each other and they're just really benefiting from each other's company, and and their secondary metabolites and their signaling and all these other things. So, yeah, and some of this is we need to find. That's why I say, when I'm experimenting with mixes, it's about who likes each other and what's not germinating really well and what is growing really well when I grow with these things. Because I mean that is an issue for people for sure.
Yeah. Just one other cool thing that we've got a couple customers that are working on there. So they're growing grain sorghum, milo,
Mhm.
as a grain crop, but then in between they're planting a pretty diverse cover crop mix: mung beans, sunflowers, all manner of different things. And the plan is not to harvest that with a combine. They're going to strip graze it with cattle after that milo has matured. So they
Yep.
give them a little bit at a time. So they're getting the grain out of the milo, but then they're also getting all of this other biomass that they've grown, and, kind of have a balanced ration, and then just have to, adjust those cattle rumens to, that level of grain, and then just work their way through it throughout the winter, a little bit at a time, which, how cool is that?
It's really cool. I mean, cattle do really well on milo stalks. They really do. And then the ground, the farm ground really benefits from that interaction. I mean, I think that the Lordings and Lance Fikirk have sort of found that really nice balance between the cattle, Lordings having the cattle and Lance being a great farmer, a great no-till farmer, and they've just really found that balance. And I think that's the other thing is having these in between the row things. But even, what we don't, we curse the crabgrass and we curse these other grasses and the other things that grow in there, but they're forage. So after the stalks are there, it's not just what I grow. I mean, there could be a number of other cool season weeds that grow in there, and they're all forage. And some of them are excellent forage.
Yeah, some of them are higher quality than what we're trying to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jill, as we kind of wrap this up and bring it to a close, tell us a little bit about some of the resources you have available at Rhizoterra. You've got your own podcast that you do. You've got all kinds of resources. Tell us just a little bit about what people can find if they go to your website.
They go to my website. They will find we have a reading list. I actually have something up to talk about how to make field trials, like how to do your own field trials and how to analyze your own field trials, and not to worry about doing super replication. But you can do it. There are a number of different ways to do this. Um, we talk about product registration and bugs in a jug and how important it is if you're going to do that, like what you look for and how to select, and not just on pictures, but actually make sure that the company is providing data. We talk about analysis a lot, like how do I analyze and what are some of the field tools that I can use in the field instead of sending things away? Are there things that I can do in the field to actually understand whether I'm making progress or not? And there are a number of in-field tools that we can use, and just really simple things. And your eyeballs are the number one thing that you can use. um, and just observation. Observation is really important, and can't stress that enough. And then, of course, we have the resources for all the. Sarah's done this big job right now of moving everything onto our website, um, for with all our videos and everything we've done, everything we've collected. All of those things are now in one place where people can have access to them. And then we'll start to have teaching resources too. Not so much me doing courses, but more resources for teachers. So ag in the classroom sort of things where people can learn about soil health, and they'll be all curriculum based, and that's coming. I'm working on some of those. And then there's just the trivia, like, B12 and soil and things like that. Like, those kinds of things. My website and, jillclapperton.com and riseofterra.com are all about community and building community of farmers, um, building a global community, because I really believe in global community. I really do. And because I do travel, I try and bring in some of that flavor into the podcast, like people from some of my travels and people who are talking about interesting things. Even if I don't get to do it when they're sitting at the table, like with Cassie and Tom, maybe another time when we're doing it just the same way, like just over or virtually. But it still, you were there, and there's some pictures. We always put some pictures in from my travels so that people can see what those fields look like. And I think what I'm going to start doing is a few more study tours. So actually, offering the opportunity for farmers, if they want to come in small groups and share the people that I'm networked with in different countries. It's curated, um, with an opportunity to actually meet farmers. So we're not, maybe there'll be some university and there'll be some other, fun touristy things, but there'll be a lot of good food. That's for one thing for sure, because I don't go anywhere where I don't eat good food. And and I eat good food. So it's like, no, we're going to eat good food. And it's about bringing farmers together to talk and understand each other and understand that, the fundamental processes are exactly the same, but people do things a little bit differently. But we can learn from that. I mean, you learn things every time you go away, you learn something. You learn, about new plants, or you learn about new techniques, or you just learn little things about equipment or whatever. Because the equipment is quite different sometimes.
That would be really interesting. When you get those study tours planned, let us know. We can help promote that, and shoot, I may even sign up to go to that. That sounds like sounds like a lot of fun. So, folks, you can learn a lot by going to Jill's website, riseoterra.com or jillclapperton.com, but you'll learn even more if you come to the Southeast Kansas Soil Health Conference, December 10th and 11th. They're in Iola, Kansas. We really hope to see you there because, like Jill said, when we get together in a room, we can learn from each other, and that's really what we try to do at our events. A lot of other great events do that too. So we hope to see you there. And Jill, thank you so much for taking some time between your travels, between all the busyness that you have. Thank you for taking time to share with our group.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Always, Keith. Always have a fun time chatting with you and Brian and the whole, yeah, cover crop crew. And I really look forward to being in Iola, Kansas. I think
All
it's going to
right.
be a fun day. It was last year. It'll be fun this year too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
My brother and I started Green Cover in 2009 because we understand what it's like to be a farmer starting out on the journey to improve soil health. We saw the power of plant and biological diversity on our own farm here in Nebraska, but we found that it was difficult to get the right cover crop seed mix. We also learned that there was a big learning curve in successfully implementing cover crops. That's why we built Green Cover, so that farmers like you can access the highest quality cover crop seed put into the right diverse mixes, along with the technical advice and the educational resources to help you successfully implement cover crops on your own operation. So contact us today and we'll help you with the right cover crop mix for your farm or ranch so you can regenerate your portion of God's creation for future generations.